Hi, this is Matt from Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns, and you're listening to another fantastic show on the Self-Defense Radio Network. Visit selfdefenseradio.net to check out all the other great shows.
Treat every firearm as if it's loaded.
Never point a firearm at anything you're not willing to kill or destroy.
Keep your finger off the trigger until you are on target and ready to fire.
Always be sure of your target and what lies beyond it.
Hi, and welcome to the Polite Society podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. We're recording this one live on Thursday, July the 16th, 2020. I'm Paul Lathrop.
I'm Robin Sandoval, and on tonight's show, we'll talk with Alan Gottlieb about GRPC moving to an online-only event.
I'm John Richardson, and we'll talk about the Brady campaign taking a PPP loan.
I'm Dana Lufer, and Senator Kelly Loeffler introduces Gun Owner Privacy Act. So climb aboard.
Strap in.
And hang on.
Episode 550 of the Polite Society podcast starts right now. Hey, everybody, we're back. It's another episode of the Polite Society podcast. It's been a little over a week since any of us recorded, so we're going to go ahead and start off. Rob's not with us, along with a bunch of other hosts, but John is. John, what's been up with you since the last time we recorded, man?
Well, this past weekend, I worked the Grassroots North Carolina booth at the Asheville Gun Show. It was somewhat crowded. It was crowded. It was spaced. We all had to wear masks, or you didn't have to, actually. A lot of people didn't. We more than doubled the number of memberships sold at an average show. I'd say we probably even tripled it. Spoke to a lot of new gun owners, and actually some folks who were looking for their first firearm. I remember on Sunday afternoon I talked to a couple, and just the week before they had bought their first firearms. I want to say a Glock 48 and a Glock 43X, and the husband and wife couple. So, a lot of new people coming in, and that's good. So, how about you, Dana? What's going on up in Michigan?
Well, I haven't done much gun sense-wise other than carrying every day. Things are in retrograde here in Michigan. Her Highness has mandated that everybody is to wear masks, both indoors and outdoors, which I think ended up resulting in an incident up near Lansing with a person who got mad at somebody about the mask and stabbed that person, and then ended up dying in an officer
I heard about that. Yeah,
shoot. So things just keep going from bad to worse up here. Rick Ector, who was on the show to talk about his Free Women Shoot, is going to be doing 2 days next month, not just the one that he usually has done. And he's up the goal to 1,500 women trained in 2 days. So his registration will be opening for that soon for any women who'd like to come out and shoot a firearm for the first time. Robin, what's happening in your neck of the woods?
Well, I have definitely seen a lot of women coming out and wanting to either be first-time gun owners or get training. We've had, my phone has been ringing off the hook. Just today, I think A Girl and a Gun has welcomed 3 new chapters. Women are just eager for training, and I'm really excited that we're able to provide it. I'm also scheduling a lot of virtual events because here in Texas, things are shutting down again too, where people are required to wear masks. It becomes difficult on the range to shoot with a mask. You have to have the visibility to see your gun into the holster. You have to be able to, see what's going on. And we've even had an incident where a woman had hot brass get in her mask. So it's definitely some safety concerns for our newer shooters and shooting with a mask. So we're doing a lot of dry fire, a lot of virtual, a lot of just different options to reach them and get them trained up. And it's just really an exciting time. So what about you, Paul? What have you been up to?
Well, for me, I we did a run. I normally am out for about a week. I leave out and go to somewhere on the coast and come back. Well, this week I had a run. Well, last week I had a run that went out to the Portland area. I delivered out in Portland, and then they said, well, instead of coming back to the upper Midwest, we've got this load we're wondering if you would take that goes all the way down to South Florida from Portland. And I said, heck yeah. And so that's what I've been doing. Instead of just a 1 week run, I was out for almost 2. I just got back today. And so doing the disarmament dance and doing a lot of planning. Most of my time, to be very honest, has been planning around Gun Rights Policy Conference and AmCon. We're going to be talking here in just a second with Alan Gottlieb about that. But that's been most of my time, has been on the road. If I'm not driving, I've been doing a lot of planning, a lot of changing of plans, and trying to get things to line up. So what I need to do before we go to break, we've got to talk about the Self-Defense Radio Network. As you can see, if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube, Self-Defense Radio Network website right up there. All your pro-freedom podcasts in one place. Not only are we there, Self-Defense Gun Stories, Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns, Firearms Chat, Mind for Survival, a lot of great shows up there. You can both listen and subscribe right off the website. So I do encourage you to go to sdrn.us and take a look there at all the great podcasts you can listen to on the Self-Defense Radio Network. Normally we talk about training as we run off to break. We'll talk about training after the interview segment because that's got a huge impact on the one that I usually talk about. We will get to all that when we talk to Alan Gottlieb. We'll do that right after this.
This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. If you carry a defensive handgun, you need protection from the aftermath of prosecution. Even if you do everything right, you can be the victim of an overzealous prosecutor or even be falsely accused. That is where the ACLDN comes in. They provide immediate assistance when you need it most. If you find yourself under arrest, they immediately pay bail money and the retainer for your attorney. Additional funds are available for trial and civil proceedings. Beyond the money, they have far and away the best team in the industry, providing you invaluable information and training DVDs that are included with your membership and who stand ready to work with your lawyer on your defense. People like Masad Ayub, John Farnham, James Fleming, Tom Gibbons, Emmanuel Capelson, Dennis Tuller, and led by Network President Marty Hayes. Initial membership is only $135 for your first year, and you get 8 incredible training DVDs and other educational material when you join. If you don't have tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself at your disposal right now, you need to be a member of the ACLDN. Go to armedcitizensnetwork.org and become a member today. And please mention that you heard about them on the Polite Society podcast.
Hey, and welcome back. This is the interview segment of the Polite Society podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. Joining us tonight, Alan, every time it seems we've had you on recently, it's for not so great news. But this, I think, is going to end up being better news than it seems. Alan Gottlieb, of course, with the Second Amendment Foundation and with the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. News came down. It was actually released yesterday that Gun Rights Policy Conference is going to be moving to an all-online event. And I guess my first question, Alan, you started off Gun Rights Policy Conference in 1986. And since then, for I think 34, 35 years, you've been going city to city and holding these, quite often in places where gun rights are the worst places. Like I seen the second one, I believe, was in Buffalo. I've been to a couple of them in Chicago. But you go place to place every year, and you've had really bad situations. Right after 9/11 happened, 9/11/01. Shortly after that, you guys still had Gun Rights Policy Conference. My first GRPC in Chicago, some nut started a fire in the Air Traffic Control Center, shut down Chicago airspace as everybody was trying to fly in. You still had gun rights policy conference. Boy, it had to be just a huge decision to take this one and move it all online. What prompted this, man?
Well, I think the main thing, Paul, that prompted it was the fact that the hotel really couldn't accommodate us all anymore. Our conference has grown rather large. We had a lot of attendees. And with the flare-up of the virus in Florida and social distancing and various state regulations, the hotel could only probably put 150 of us in the ballroom. And, last week we had well over 300 pre-registered. We're obviously going to end up with thousands of people trying to get in. It just isn't going to work. And on top of that, the hotel had the other significant problem that for food service, all the hoops they have to jump through, the buffets, there's breaks. There's no way they could clean up and comply with all the restrictions and requirements in the state of Florida. So the hotel couldn't accommodate us, and therefore was more than happy to let us out of our agreement because they really couldn't perform. So that really was the tipping of the scale. And we did have some speakers that were leery about going. We had some attendees that were also still leery about going to Florida right now, not knowing what the situations are going to be like, 2 months out from now. It would have been a problem anyway. So the hotel made it easy for us when they really said they couldn't comply.
Okay. All right. So the decision was made to go to an online format this year. And
excuse me, but I have a furry creature that's whining in the background here that really wants to be a part of it.
Winston wants to say hi. Hey, Winston. Anybody that's been to Gun Rights Policy Conference is very familiar with Winston.
I think we all knew that
Yeah.
was Winston,
So
it's okay.
So he's gone behind me in the chair, and he'll stop whining.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. So with the decision to go online only, that's going to change a little bit of the look of GRPC. What do you expect it to look like this year?
Well, what we're going to do, obviously, we're going to have multiple platforms on the internet for people to participate with it. But in doing that, we decided, instead of a normal agenda that has, 9 o'clock you have this, at 9:30 you have this, we're going to set it up so it's going to be in 3 blocks, block A, B, and C, and with each one there'll be numbered sessions. So people can, then when it's archived, can go in and choose things to relook at or look at for the first time at their own convenience. But at this point, our initial agenda is showing 35 sessions with well over 100 speakers. So it's going to be expanded, which gives us an opportunity to have more content. And the second thing is that because it's online, we have a chance of bringing in some speakers that normally we couldn't get. Some celebrity people that normally can't travel and have the time to go to Gun Rights Policy Conference and be part of it can now be part of it. So we're really excited. And yeah, you're right. It's probably a blessing in disguise. However, I'm really looking forward to 2021 when we can do it again live, face-to-face, in person. Because as you guys know, being attending past ones, one of the really key important things is the networking.
Yes.
And, I'm going to really miss the networking part of it. We're not going to be able to have that per se. But I understand, though, that there's some ways we might be able to work some of that in a little bit. And I think I'm going to tell your audience, one of the things that's going to make this whole thing virtually possible is your involvement in helping out to do that. So I want to personally thank you for all the effort you're putting in to making sure the Gun Rights Policy Conference survives, in a virtual environment. And I'm really excited about it. But it's really important to do it live when we can, face to face. So the hope is that we don't have this problem ever again. But if we do, all the bugs will already be worked out this year.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you're right about networking.
Funny. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the 2 incidents we had. We had the Gun Rights Policy Conference in the Cincinnati area a week after things opened up after 9/11. And we were worried that, airplanes weren't going to be flying. You're a week out and you don't know what's going to happen. And it turned out we had, up to that point in time, we had a record attendance for one. We had some excitement because we had a bunch of airline pilots from various airlines over there that set up the Airline Pilots Association that helped get armed pilots in the cockpits, and that came out of a gun rights policy conference. We didn't know if it was going to come off, and something giant came out of it. And as you mentioned in Chicago, that was already scheduled. Everything was shipped. Everything was set up, and then the air traffic control towers go down because disgruntled employees set fire to it, and we couldn't get all our speakers in. Some attendees couldn't get in. Our agenda changed hour by hour for who was in the room and who could speak, and it was one of the best conferences we ever had. So again, from adversity, sometimes really builds some great things for the gun rights movement, and I think that's the case this year.
Yeah, I remember that Chicago one. That was my first one in Chicago. I'd been to 2 before that. My very first one was Orlando the last time we were there. And that Chicago one, everything was so up in the air. And one of my, he's not here tonight, but one of the guys that's with me on a regular basis, Gary, kept elbowing me going, dude, you ought to see if they'll let you speak. And I'm like, I'm not big enough to speak. And so, it was a great conference, and then we came back. Every time we go back to a city, it seems our audience keeps growing. The attendees was 1,100 we had in Phoenix last year. Just stunning, the amount of people that show up, and every year it seems something comes out of it.
Yeah, the Phoenix conference was our biggest. I can't say for sure it was our best, but sure each one has a certain flavor and flair to it, and something a little unique. And it gets kind of exciting. And I think the online version this year, because it's online, will have some unique things we couldn't have pulled off otherwise.
Sure. Well, Robin, I think you had a question you wanted to ask.
Yeah, so like you said, each year GRPC keeps getting bigger and bigger, and this year with the thousands of new gun owners coming into the community, are you seeing that influx in the Second Amendment Foundation, and what do you think that's going to look like for the future of Second Amendment advocacy?
Well, Robin, that's a very good question. Let me answer that a couple ways. I don't think it's going to impact, if we had our gun rights policy conference done, like we usually do in person, I don't think it would have impacted it very much at all. But because it's online and it's being virtual, I think we're going to have a whole lot new first-time gun owners tuning into GRPC that never would have had a chance to go to Orlando. And I think that's going to be really important. As far as what we're seeing here, we're growing a little bit, and of course, there's a lot of it's because of new gun owners in size, but it's not exponentially hitting us quite yet. But I'm hoping that we're able to reach out and figure out how to capture these new gun owners and bring them into the gun rights movement. That will be one of the topics, by the way, at our Gun Rights Policy Conference September 19th when we launch it.
So the reach, I've been, and this is a not so secret because I think I'm sure I've talked about it on the show before. I do the video from Gun Rights Policy Conference that everybody sees every year. And our reach on social media has been decent. We get about 100,000 per weekend for each. Last year, I think it came up to 130,000 was the final total at the live part of it. But we're really hoping. My understanding is you've set a goal for 300,000. My goal is a little higher than that, but that's what we're hoping for, is a reach of 300,000 this year, right?
Well, I'd like your goal. I think your goal was 500,000.
Yeah.
Julianne mentioned that to me, and I had in our initial thing, I was shooting for 200,000. And then when she said you wanted 500,000, I said, well, I better raise my goal a little bit. I'm a little off base here, so 300,000. And that's how I came up with that number.
All right. Well, John, you're up next in show notes, man.
Yeah, Alan, I've got a couple of questions. First, would you like to comment at all about the report that the Brady campaign and Giffords Law Center took the payroll protection plan money so they could keep their staff going during COVID?
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that. We put out a news release on that from the Second Amendment Foundation. I was appalled when I heard that, when I got that information, for a number of reasons. First of all, I think it's immoral to begin with. When you're out there pushing your political positions, and especially when you're trying to upend the Constitution and wipe out the Second Amendment, I'm appalled that you're forcing gun-owning taxpayers to pay for your staff, and your rent and other things as well. That bothered me greatly. But what really bothers me is they didn't even need that money to stay open. They have millions of dollars of assets in the bank. So they're just ripping off the taxpayers in general for doing that. And not only that, but a lot of their staff is shared. So people who are on their public policy part of it, also involved in their political part and their PAC. And it really disturbs me greatly that we're ending up paying for some of the salaries of the people that are directly involved in campaigning, directly involved in political advocacy. It's absolutely disgusting. The Second Amendment Foundation didn't apply for any because we didn't think it's right for us to do so. And our sister group, the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep Bear Arms, because it does get engaged directly in grassroots and direct lobbying, we didn't apply for it either. So I'm just appalled that they went and they did that. And it wasn't just the Brady Center, but you had the Gifford Center doing it too. And together they probably took in $1 million worth of taxpayer funding. And we've demanded that they give the money back. And I'm hoping to help start a congressional investigation as to why groups like that even were allowed to apply for the money.
Do you think it should call into question their tax-exempt status?
Well, I'm not sure you can call their tax-exempt status into question, but I think you surely should take the money away from them and force them to give it back. And not only that, but you might want to argue, since it wasn't contributions to them, maybe it's taxable income. And maybe they should be forced to pay tax on the money they took. It just reeks, it stinks, it's disgusting, and it shows what our opponents are like. And these are the kind of people that, should not even be engaged in the public debate on the Second Amendment, right to keep and bear arms. These people are people who can't be trusted. And again, it's just what they did was it's another fraud that they perpetrated against the American public.
Well, Alan, we're coming up on break. Can I have you hang out for one more segment with us?
My pleasure.
All right. Folks, we are going to step aside to break. We've got more with Alan Gottlieb of the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. We'll be right back with that right after this. This portion of the Polite Society podcast is brought to you by The Complete Combatant. The Complete Combatant is designed for a broad base of citizens that range from students that don't own a gun on up to advanced students that train often. The Complete Combatant offers several different courses that build upon each other, from avoidance, using verbal commands, and preparing for contact, lethal versus non-lethal decisions, your 911 call, interacting with the police, to even dealing with the legal system in the aftermath. The Complete Combatant courses are a layered approach for all levels of experience that will walk you through all the many stages of decisions while developing a game plan tailored to your skills and your everyday carry. Please visit www.thecompletecombatant.com and make sure you mention this ad to receive 15% off. Again, that's www.thecompletecombatant.com and mention the ad for 15% off. Hey, and we're back. This is the Polite Society podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. This is our second interview segment with Alan Gottlieb of the Second Amendment Foundation. And John, I think you had one more question you wanted to ask that you had up in show notes, man.
I did. And actually, this is kind of good news I'd like Alan to comment on. I read a report today that said the government of the Czech Republic was supporting a move to add the right to keep and bear arms as a protected right to their constitution. I know that you and Julianne had been instrumental in the foundation of IPCAR. What do you think of this move? Do you think you will see it in other places in Central and Eastern Europe? I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned IAPCAR, the International Association for the Protection of Civilian Arms Rights, which we helped fund and found. We now have, I think it's 36 different organizations in 29 countries that are involved in it. And the Czech Republic has an affiliate in our group. And of course, they've been actively working to make that happen in the Czech Republic. But we're seeing it in a lot of other places as well in Eastern Europe, but not only in Eastern Europe, but across the country, across the globe. we have very active groups who are expanding gun rights in India, in Argentina, a lot of the Eastern European countries. But it's really great to see, and they all view it as Second Amendment rights. I love when these people all across the country talk about Second Amendment, even though they don't have one, they know what it is. And it's all about freedom, and they care about it. So it's moving in that direction. Where our biggest problems come in, we deal with this at the Gun Rights Policy Conference as well. And we're going to have a lot of international people speaking this time because it's easier for them to do it now, since it's going to be virtual, on what's going on across the globe. In Australia and Canada and other places, but this is an international battle that's going on, and our argument is that gun rights shouldn't stop at any country's border, and as a result, we're making some progress. Our hardest parts, right, are places in the European Union, because the EU is so stacked against us right now with legislators. Until some elections take place there and things change, it's going to be a little difficult. But we're on the march protecting gun rights and expanding gun rights all across the globe.
Don't you find it interesting that you see the strongest growth of it in Eastern Europe, where they were under the yoke of communism, versus Western Europe, which was supposedly free?
It really doesn't surprise me, because they know what freedom is all about. When you lose your freedom, that's when it starts to mean something to you. And what's interesting is in a lot of the Eastern European countries, even though under the yoke of the Soviet Union, including Russia itself, the amount of guns that are there are amazingly large. After World War II, those guns weren't turned in anywhere. They were basically buried and hidden and kept. And there's an awful lot of quote-unquote illegal guns in some of those Eastern Bloc countries that have been saved for years because people valued them and they weren't going to give them up, and the government didn't know what to do with it. And in some of those countries in more rural areas, in many of these years, since World War II, the only way you could eat would be if you could hunt. And if you didn't have a firearm to hunt with, you starved, because the government wasn't there to provide you food or help a vibrant economy. So gun rights is taken pretty seriously in most of those Eastern European countries.
All right, Dana, I think you're next up with a question in show notes, and this is a really relevant one.
I was really looking forward to attending my first GRPC this year and getting to meet all the great 2A people. I mean, you talked about networking, and we've talked to a few of the people here on the podcast. Others I've been listening to for years. A lot of conferences have gotten canceled this year and had their venues just book them for the same time next year. Is Orlando in the cards for next year, or do we just have to wait?
Well, we don't know for sure that the hotel is going to be able to accommodate us, because they may have other things booked and scheduled. We've been in contact with them, and we're waiting to hear back right now for a proposal for either 2 different weekends in September in 2021. So we're likely to go back to Orlando, but I can't guarantee it yet. It may end up somewhere else. We usually make our decisions in November of the previous year. So, and we start working on it right after in October, trying to get venues in different cities and have them compete with different bids to see where it makes most sense for us to put it. So my hope is we go back to Orlando, but it's no guarantee.
Well, and one thing a lot of people don't realize, Alan, is that, and I know this for a fact because I know a lot of your team, I have a lot of contact with them on a regular basis, planning for Gun Rights Policy Conference, planning for 2021 is already underway, and planning for 2022 starts usually just about the time GRPC 2021 will wrap up. It's an ongoing thing every year that if you're not holding one at that exact moment, planning for the next one has already started.
Yeah, we sort of have a mode. One, we have to get the venue. Usually, we pick out a half a dozen different cities that we'll look at, and then it's finding the venue and getting the contract negotiated and signed, and then it starts some early promotion for it. Then it comes to trying to set the topics for the agenda, and then it's trying to go out and get all the speakers, and then all the materials, and then have them all shipped out, then getting the hotel all set up. Usually about this time before GRPC in July, we're almost 50% into everything we have to start doing. It gets kind of rough around here. Between now and the end of September, it's battle stations in our office.
Oh, sure. And the other thing I wanted to bring up, I've seen a little, surprisingly little, but there has been some commentary that I pay attention to on social media, in that when the announcement was made that it's going online only, there were people that were saying, well, take it to Idaho. Idaho's still open. Or take it to South Dakota, my home state, which, by the way, you were just at. I believe I seen pictures of you at the Mount Rushmore celebration on the 3rd. But you can't just really, something this big that takes this much planning, you can't just snap your fingers and move in a location.
No, you can't. Like I'm just saying, you mentioned Idaho. Well, one of the problems is that usually 50% of the attendees come from a 200-mile radius, and Idaho doesn't have that big a population, so we wouldn't have one of our bigger attendances. The second thing is venues. In Idaho, probably there's no venue that we could put it at outside the state capital in Boise, which is the biggest city, and we probably would only have a choice of maybe one hotel to go to that could handle us in size. Then we have the problem is, are they booked or not? So we tend to use as a guideline, sort of my secret recipe. If a city isn't big enough to have a pro baseball team, a pro football team, pro basketball team, so they can have enough attendance to fill stadiums, it's probably not big enough for us to do GRPC in.
Right. And so it's, and one other thing I want to bring up, and that is that you have to also keep in mind the health of your attendees, whether listeners, viewers, if you believe that the COVID thing is overblown or not, if you think masks are overblown or not. The fact is, COVID does exist, and I can tell you from being to several of these things that the population that attends Gun Rights Policy Conference trends towards older population, and that's certainly a population we don't want to put at risk, right?
That's true. And again, we're all going to be confined in a ballroom with, 1,000, 1,500 people. It's tight quarters. We have to have some food served, in a cafeteria style approach for our breaks and things. And you have certain state regulations now we have to comply with. We don't have a choice. I mean, the hotel under Florida law is obligated for social distancing, for cleaning between sessions. They can't put out certain foods, certain ways. It makes it really tough. So, it's beyond our control to some extent, and that's what made our final decision. Luckily enough, the hotel pretty much told us they couldn't accommodate us early enough on, so we could start to make some other plans and do the GRPC a different way, virtually this time. Our concern was that now it would be a week out before the conference, and all of a sudden, we can't do the conference there, and everything would be shot, and we couldn't put anything in place. Luckily, we had enough time to be able to recover and make a GRPC really happen.
Over 100 people you're talking about possibly speaking for this year's GRPC. It was, I believe, 91 last year in Phoenix. The one thing that I think will be a little bit easier on you folks is that the timekeeping is going to be a little bit easier with it being all remote. You won't have to be tapping on somebody's shoulder saying, hey, your time really is up.
I was thinking that too, that I won't have Julianne standing right here next to me. Maybe I'll be able to get through my speech without being nervous about it.
Well, Julianne's still going to have some input into this, and she's already told some of the speakers who've contacted her that just because I'm not going to be there to play so-called, time Nazi with you and make sure that you're on schedule, I'll just pull the plug and you'll get cut off in mid-sentence now on the internet.
That's awesome. Does anybody else have any questions they want to shoot towards Alan?
I want to thank Alan for pivoting and keeping GRPC happening, because I know how big of an event it is and how much coordination it takes, and how coordinating all of the speakers and all of your staff is such a major undertaking. So thank you for not throwing in the towel. Thank you for pivoting and making this possible, because we're all going to miss seeing our friends, but still getting that information out there, and especially being able to share it with all the new gun owners coming in and getting them the firepower they need to talk to their congressmen and to get involved and to pay attention to the litigation that you guys have going on. Thank you for giving us those tools to really arm up all these new people.
Well, Robin, thank you for those kind words. To me, the important thing about GRPC, it isn't really run necessarily what we oversee it. It's not run from the top down. It's almost run from the bottom up, with over 100 speakers this year as an example, representing lots of state, local activists and groups. This is the only place where the whole gun rights movement can come together on basically an equal footing. If you notice, our staff doesn't dominate the speakers. We bring in everybody. We try to be as inclusive as possible. And that's the beauty of it. That's what makes it work. It's every speaker, every attendee is the Gun Rights Policy Conference.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and set it aside there, Alan. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be promoting Gun Rights Policy Conference as we get closer. Everything is really, believe it or not, I think I'm even just a little more excited about this one, knowing what can happen. And I really do expect for a huge boost when we do online viewership.
Well, thank you, Paul, too, because you're the person who's going to help make this all possible. And the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep Arms owes you a big debt of gratitude this year. So thank you, because without you, we may not have had this conference coming off.
Well, it's anything I can do to help. It's always been that way, man. It always will be.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we are going to step aside to break. When we come back, we've got our news segment to come, and we'll get to that right after this.
Is brought to you by Concealment Solutions. Jason Christensen makes the most comfortable inside the waistband holster on the market, bar none. The Black Mamba. Some of the other products offered are the Sidewinder outside the waistband holster and Python gun belts. Every product that Concealment Solutions makes has unsurpassed craftsmanship that shows in the fit and finish of the product. Visit concealmentsolutions.com to view all of the products available, and you can get 10% off your order when you enter the promo code POLITICS in the promo code box at checkout. That's concealmentsolutions.com.
And welcome back to the news segment of the Polite Society podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. We're going to go ahead and lead off news segment. We talked about this a little bit during the interview, but I think it's worth going into in depth a little bit more, and that is the Paycheck Protection Program. The Brady Center and the Giffords Law Center both received loans through the PPP, and see here, let me read down here. The Brady PAC endorsed Joe Biden and pledged $4 million to support candidates, liberal candidate and anti-gun candidates, and yet they took a PPP loan. See here, between $350,000 and $1 million. So they're basically what it sounds like to me, and anybody can jump in here, is this is them taking money and putting it into the money laundering machine, and it goes out to Democratic candidates. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, you are. When you think about it, the keeping staff employed and going, it's key for these these gun control organizations. NRA, by contrast, furloughed 200 people.
Mm-hmm.
Now the NRA is much larger, but nonetheless, they do keep more of a separate line between ILA and the NRA itself, especially, and the Political Victory Fund is totally separate. But one thing that Alan brought up is that they have millions and millions in assets. Could they have just asked Bloomberg, could you just toss us $1 million or $2 million?
Yeah.
It's pocket change to him. And in terms of Giffords, I just looked at the fundraising numbers for Gabby Giffords' husband, Mark Kelly, who is running for the U.S. Senate from Arizona. He's taken in over $30 million. And, the only reason I'm on his list is because I was on the Giffords list. Funny how that works.
Gee, imagine that.
I know. Like, there's no coordination or anything. Yeah.
Well, in April, the Brady PAC had paid the Brady Center $50,000 to cover staff and $2,200 for travel expenses. So they'd already done it. So then they turn around and get the PPP loan right after that.
I'm very, very, very remiss. I haven't even looked at the feedback coming from listeners, and boy, we've got just a whole lot of feedback, mostly from the Alan Gottlieb interview, but we're I'm going to bring up Nikki's first. I'm going to go ahead and send that and bring that up. St. Louis, Missouri. What actions are being taken to deal with the prosecution of that homeowner who defended himself against a mob? And unfortunately, Nikki, I was not able to ask that of Alan, but I will say this. Those two are very high-priced attorneys. They are very successful attorneys, or they wouldn't have the property they did. Right. My understanding is that they're on very solid legal ground, and I wouldn't worry about them too much, although I guess that could change. John.
Yeah, I just read today that Senator Josh Hawley, is calling on the Department of Justice to investigate the DA for St. Louis for basically harassing the McCloskeys and trying to deprive them of their rights. If you don't know, that the DA for St. Louis got into office with a good deal of money from George Soros. Now, I don't want to just say, conspiracy theory, whatever. But Hawley, prior to becoming U.S. Senator, was the Attorney General for the state of Missouri. So I think he understands what's going on. And the other thing that I've seen along those lines is that there have been a number of gun shops in the St. Louis area who have offered the McCloskeys a free AR-15 to replace the one that was taken under a search warrant by the police, and most importantly, free training to go along with it.
And they need that training. They really do.
Yeah, I think everyone recognizes that they need training, and I read yesterday that they have been offered 50 rifles so far of people wanting to help them stay armed, even with the search warrant that took their 2 guns that they had.
Wow. And Robin, we did get a comment that your audio is still a little bit low, so really, really try to project out if you can.
Sorry, guys.
All right, let's talk other news. What else have we got?
We mentioned Kelly Loeffler, the Gun Owner Privacy Act. It would ban the use of federal funds to store personal information collected during background checks. And we would have a recourse for privacy. It's one of those bills that certainly is needed, but you also see somebody in the heat of a political campaign coming up with this when she probably knows that it would never, ever get through a Democratic House. She also has made some comments recently that were marginally anti-gun, so I think she's trying to backtrack a little here.
One other news item that I see in here is Democrats introduced Stop Home Manufacture of Ghost Guns Act of 2020. and that would ban ownerships of firearms manufacturing device unless it's in the hands of a federally licensed firearm manufacturer or FFL. The broad definition would make hobbyist-level mini CNC machines illegal to own. Much of the maker community would now be outlaws. Not only that, anybody that owns any 3D printer, because of the plans that are very easily accessible for the, I believe the isn't it John the Liberator? Is that the name of the plans that are and they've
was the first one up, and they've got tons more.
Oh yeah, and I gotta be honest. Anybody that owns a hammer, I've watched a YouTube video of somebody making an AK receiver out of a hammer, an anvil, and a shovel.
Yeah.
And so if you own a hammer, an anvil, and a shovel, you could be a criminal. Now let's be realistic about this. The chances of this passing in the current before November with President Trump as the president and with a Republican-led Senate, the chances of this passing are absolutely zero.
Correct.
So it's out there. It's more of a. I think it was probably introduced. Rob would be all over this. It's out there as a fundraising thing. I introduced this bill, and and that's as far as it'll go.
Well, the thing is, I mean, I look at this auction site on a regular basis called Proxy Bid, and every now and then I will look at milling machines. I mean, we're talking big milling machines. That machine shops are closing down. They're auctioning off their equipment. You could pick up a Bridgeport milling machine, actually probably cheaper than a lot of the desktop stuff. Now, of course, this thing weighs a ton, and you need special power and all. But you could make stuff from scratch that would make stuff from the 3D printer look, well, it's what you use at Ruger and Remington and Winchester, etc., to make guns.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen some of these go for $250.
Wow. Now, like you said, you've still got to move it. You've got to power it. And those things aren't cheap, but yeah.
Yeah.
According to my reading on what this act would do, those would be still able to be owned by anybody because they're just looking at the small desktop CNC machines or 3D printers, not the industrial ones.
Well, if one comes unavailable, you use what you can use. Yeah. Let's see here. What else do we want to talk about? New York shootings increased 130% in June versus 219th. In Chicago, 64 were shot, 11 killed last weekend. A 1-year-old shot and killed in Brooklyn last Saturday. Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot blames lack of federal strategy to combat use of guns, while also pushing to defund police. Wow, the antis are really in the news this week.
Oh, the AOC one though is she's blaming the uptick in shooting of people who are out of work and they're needing money to pay their rent, and they're shoplifting bread to feed their kids. Nothing about de Blasio releasing tons and tons of prisoners.
Yeah.
Along with, we're not going to charge you bail. It's your own recognizance. It's almost, where's Jim Cirillo when you need him in the stakeout squad?
Yeah. Nikki on social media, I'll bring this in here. It's Nikki said, stopping home manufacturing guns will be as successful as our ban on home growing of marijuana. That's exactly true. All right. I think we're coming up on the end of the segment here, and I got to admit I did not set my stopwatch, but it's sure seems like 15 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and step aside to break. When we come back, we've got our, excuse me, we come back, we've got our DGU segment. We'll get to that right after this.
Firearm Safety Institute is one of Northwest Illinois' premier firearm training companies. They provide superior firearm training to all levels of shooters. Gary Doherty has been a trainer and concealed weapons permit holder for many years. While living in Nevada, he carried legally and has the experience to train you to do the same. Firearms Safety Institute offers a wide range of courses designed to meet the personal needs of both seasoned shooters and those that are new to the world of firearms. If you are looking to apply for the Illinois Concealed Carry License, Firearms Safety Institute can provide you with the professional training that meets the state's requirements. Gary accommodates classes of all sizes and can provide individualized instruction if that is your personal preference. He's happy to work with you and your friends to arrange private classes and will come to your location and work around your schedule. If you would like to get your Illinois CCW or increase your firearm knowledge or skills, go to firearmsafetyinstitute.com to start the conversation. Mention the Polite Society podcast and receive a 10% discount on your training. Remember, that's firearmsafetyinstitute.com. Get your Illinois CCW today.
Hey, and welcome back to the Defensive Gun Use segment of the Polite Society podcast, powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. These discussions are not legal advice. Some of us are trainers, but this is not formal training, and you need formal training. The Defensive Gun Use segment is intended as information, not as training. As always, the opinions of the hosts are only their own opinions and are not opinions of any sponsors or other affiliations. Dana, you got our first story up in show notes, man.
This one comes from Dallas, Georgia. A 16-year-old boy arranged to meet with 3 men outside a grocery store to buy a cell phone advertised on Snapchat. His mother came along. The time was 1:45 p.m. They met at the field center attached to the Kroger. The cell phone they produced was not the one they had agreed to sell the boy. He followed them to their green sedan and they showed him a plethora of other phones. None of them were the ones that he had his heart set on. At this point, the 3 men attacked the youth. They attempted to get his money out of his pocket. His mother, watching as her son was punched in the face and put in a headlock. Unbeknownst to the 3 hoods, the mother was in the truck. When she saw the beating going on, she got out of the truck and fired a single shot. Evidently, the 3 criminals forgot their own firearms in their other pants. They jumped in their car and left the scene. Police assistant chief reported that there were no reported injuries and no damage to any surrounding vehicles or businesses in the busy lot. They suspect that her shot may have hit the suspect's sedan. Investigators were trying to obtain surveillance video to get a better determination on the make and model of the vehicle and using the boy's cell phone to track down the suspects. According to the assistant chief, his department has investigated similar cases of theft during transaction meetups. The lure is usually cell phones or high-end shoes. They did everything right. It still nearly went south for them, he said of the mother and son. You just have to be aware of your surroundings.
I'm going to jump in first on this one, and I don't know about Dallas, Georgia, but I do know most metro areas. I know Little Sioux Falls has this policy where you can meet at the police station to do online to do meetups for selling and buying of merchandise that you advertise or seen online. And I'm going to strongly recommend that. And if your police department in your town doesn't offer that, reach out to them, see if it's something that can be done. Because this sounds like something. I mean, at a, it was at a gas station. Although it may have been well lit, it wasn't. There wasn't a lot of things around to prevent them from trying to jump this kid. Good on the mom for having a firearm on her and knowing when to use it. I wish she would have been a little bit better of a marksman. However, who knows? Her son was entangled in a fight right there. Maybe she couldn't shoot at the suspects because the son was too close. She couldn't get a clear shot.
I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to suggest a lot of police stations do offer this for, like, you buy stuff off of Craigslist or Facebook Market or whatever. I think it's an excellent. They weren't doing it at night. They were doing it early afternoon, which, I mean,
I hope it's well lit.
Yeah. Could have been cloudy. You never know.
Oh, yeah, well, 1:45 in the afternoon. Right, I'm sorry. I normally just, when I hear these, I automatically think evening because that's when most attacks happen. But you're right, 1:45 in the afternoon, it darn well better be lit, especially this time of year.
I'm just really glad that with all of the, all of us, when we saw that this was a Snapchat marketplace adventure, we're grateful that his mother went with him. So
oh, yeah.
At least she had that awareness and she was armed and prepared. So she even knew that it could have been a shady situation. So I'm glad she was prepared for that.
Good mom.
Amen. All right, John, you got our next one out of Florida.
Yeah, this comes from Wesley Chapel, Florida. Early on a Friday morning, the homeowner was at home alone, playing video games. He heard glass shatter toward the back of his house. He grabbed a gun and began walking down his hallway. What he saw was an armed intruder wearing dark clothing and a mask. Even criminals have to avoid the COVID. The homeowner shot and killed the first intruder. He then eliminated a second one who was right behind the first. One of the three criminals managed to fire a gun. The homeowner wasn't done shooting, though. He got the third intruder and then his gun jammed. He went to grab another gun, and the third intruder decided he had had enough of being shot. He got up and got out of there. Problem for him was that the homeowner had good neighbors. The thug was stopped in his tracks by a neighbor and held until the Pasco County Sheriff's deputies arrived. The 19-year-old was taken to the hospital and is expected to survive. He will be facing 2 counts of second-degree homicide and 1 count of home invasion robbery. He and his 21-year-old compatriots all have violent criminal rap sheets. Why was this home targeted? Social media. The homeowner is a firearm enthusiast and has posted pictures of his firearms on these accounts. He believes he was targeted for that reason. Sheriff Chris Noko said, "We believe there was a relationship, that there was some type of known entity between the victim and the suspects. So this is not a totally random situation. This is an isolated, targeted situation, and the case is still under investigation."
I'm going to say the homeowner was a collector, an enthusiast, and I wish Tracy was here. I really, really wish Tracy was here, because I'll just bet you the firearm that jammed after the shooting, the third one, was a 1911. It just
I almost said that in the thing just to throw it to you.
Yeah. It just because when I think jam of a firearm, I honestly don't think 1911s. I think of Jennings firearms. I think of the very low price point firearms, which 1911s normally aren't. But this guy's a collector. You wouldn't think he'd come with a whole lot of really inexpensive stuff. So, like I said, I really wish Tracy was here so I could give her a little bit of a hard time. But the other thing I want to comment about this one is very obvious, that was pointed out in the story. If you've got guns, great. I have guns. I have no problem talking about them on Facebook. Usually when I do, I put those posts to friends only. But I've got a lot of friends on Facebook. I've got a lot of people that follow me and become friends because of the show. I don't I have never really met everybody that's friends with me on Facebook.
Oh no, yeah.
So just be friggin' careful about what you put online.
In one sense, this is the firearm equivalent of somebody who gets targeted because they're ill, they have cancer or whatever, and they have opioid type drugs. I mean, it basically is the same thing. We know this guy has got something we want, whether it's drugs or guns, so therefore he becomes the target, or she.
Right. And I got to give a shout out to Charlie Chambers watching online. He commented with the hashtag Glocks do not jam ever. So,
well, they might with limp wristing.
They may. I've seen Glocks jam with limp wristing, and when I very first bought a Glock, I did with my Glock Model 22. I did a torture test, and I put thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds in it without cleaning it. After, I want to say, I was nearing 4,000 rounds when it finally did start to have failure to eject problems.
Now, I'm going to say that I've got a Glock 22, and I did put a converter barrel in it. And until I got the spring adjusted, I went through multiple springs. I had a lot of stovepiping.
Okay.
A lot of jams from stovepiping. And I put it down to being a conversion.
Could very well be. Could very well be. All right, well, that does do it for our defensive gun use segment. We're going to go ahead and set it aside there. When we come back, we've got our final segment. We'll talk about blog notes, and we'll wrap the show up right after this.
In 1928, Germany required its citizens to register their firearms, making possible Hitler's 1938 Nazi Weapons Act, disarming all Jews. Now ask yourself, what is the real consequence of registration? All in favor of gun control, raise your right hand. Brought to you by Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, America's aggressive civil rights organization. jpfo.org.
And welcome to the final segment of the Polite Society podcast powered by the Firearms Policy Coalition. Before we get to blog notes, before we get to listener feedback and all that, and by the way, just got home today, so I haven't had a chance to check email. I will check it right after we wrap the show, and if there is any, we'll put it on the next show. But I want to talk about, we kind of teased this in the Alan Gottlieb interview. There's been some changes besides just Gun Rights Policy Conference going online. Since we're, of course, not gathering at Orlando, the decision was made, and we're going to be moving AmCon to the weekend before GRPC. We're going to be doing it on the Saturday, the 12th of September, and GRPC kicks off on the 18th. And we are going to be absolutely live. You will not. If you've ever watched an AmCon online, the only thing you'll notice that is different is we're not all in the same place. You'll still be able to do like you do with the Polite Society podcast. You'll be able to comment on social media, and since I'm not going to be on camera and part of the personalities of the show, I'll be watching that, and your comments about what the speakers are talking about, your questions for the speakers, will go online, and those questions will be asked when we get to the question and answer session for each of the speakers. The other thing that I have been planning and doing a lot of work on around Gun Rights Policy Conference is the ride. The ride is my plan to jump on my almost 40-year-old motorcycle and do 1,100 miles in under 24 hours, and then take a day off, and then complete the ride into Orlando to kick off Gun Rights Policy Conference and AmCon. Well, obviously, with AmCon and GRPC going online only, me taking a 3,200 mile motorcycle ride within a 3 to 4 day time span is not realistic. What is going to happen is, and Julianne with the Gun Rights Policy with the people for Gun Rights Policy Conference, she's Alan's wife and a very instrumental part in the SAF. We're going to be taking that and we're going to make it a virtual ride. It's going to be part of Gun Rights Policy Conference. That's all I'm going to say at this moment. Wait until you see what is planned. I'm going to keep my mouth shut about it until it actually happens on September 18th. But that's one more reason you absolutely need to tune in to Gun Rights Policy Conference when it happens on September 18th, because my ride is going to be a virtual ride, and I think you're really, really, really going to enjoy it. All right, let's go ahead and talk about blog posts. And Rob is not here tonight, but I do want to encourage you to go look at his blog at slowfacts.wordpress.com. And let's go ahead then and talk about, John, onlygunsandmoney.com. What have you got up there?
Well, H652 would have allowed North Carolina churches with attached schools to protect themselves. As it stands now, the whole property is considered educational property and guns are banned. It's a gun-free zone. Churches without schools don't have this restriction. The bill originally passed with a veto-proof majority in both houses, and then Governor Cooper vetoed it. When it came time to override the veto, 6 Democrats in the House changed their original votes to nay and sustained the veto. Since the Republicans don't have a supermajority anymore, they needed the Democrats. I did a post where I pointed out the 6 defectors, which includes my own representative, along with churches in their own districts that they put at risk. They preferred supporting the governor rather than supporting their own good, honest, God-fearing constituents. That and more is at onlygunsandmoney.com.
All right, very cool. I want to bring up one more thing that I forgot to bring up that got changed because of the move to an online GRPC, and that is the last few weeks you've been hearing me talk about the training that is going to be offered by the complete combatant that I was going to be taking part in the Wednesday of GRPC week. Obviously, with us not going to gather all in Orlando and me not being able to be there, they did cancel that training session for that Wednesday, and all people that bought that training session, their money has been refunded. And just a sign of the times, I guess, that mark another one down to COVID that we're not going to be able to do that. All right. Does anybody have training going on? Because we didn't mention it at the very open of the show. Has anybody got any training that they want to talk about? I'm hearing crickets.
Well, I have a lot going on. Girl and again, we're moving a lot of things virtual. We do have some ranges that are open. We have a big clays shoot coming up in August, which is just a fun shoot, and I'm hoping it can still happen in Kansas. So otherwise, we might have to call it a protest so we can all still go. But hopefully that'll still happen, and then we're still hoping to have our big 3-gun match in October. So COVID hopefully won't ruin all of our plans this year.
Amen. Amen. Well, I do want to mention before we go, please, everybody, go look at the Facebook listeners group. We get new people in there every single week. Just search Facebook for Polite Society Podcast listeners and request to become a member. Those requests are usually approved within a few seconds after they happen. So that does wrap up another episode of the Polite Society Podcast. I'd like to thank Alan Gottlieb for joining us today. So for Amy, Dana, Gary, John, Susan, Tracy, Amanda, Robin, and Rob, Until next time.
Stay safe.
Be aware.
And we'll see you down the road.
The views and opinions on the show you just heard are those of the host and the guest and are not necessarily the views of any sponsors or other affiliations. But hey, not everyone is as smart as we are.